Hi, Sabrina. Hi, Julian. For everybody who doesn't know what you're doing, what is Business Insider doing?
What is Business Insider doing? Business Insider is informing and inspiring a new generation of business people for news content globally.
How you went international?
How do we go international? The story of Business Insider is, I don't know how well known here, but quite globally well known as a big success story over the last decade. We launched in 2007, a 3-people startup creating content in New York for business and finance, and really with a mission to create a different type of business news for digital-only generation and business news that could be entertaining. And so when they created that, indulge me in this short story, we really thought about that as a New York thing, and there was a huge demand for it in New York, and it grew and grew and grew. And about 8 years later, we were realizing that the internet creates this democracy of content, right? And so actually, everywhere around the world, people are coming to read our content, even though we maybe didn't intend to write that for everyone around the world originally. We're seeing that everyone around the world is interested in it, so we've started to see big audiences coming from other markets outside the US. We launched in English language markets originally, and I was responsible for launching the UK one 4 years ago. And we quickly saw that actually what we were creating were global stories that traveled well. And there's a difference between global news and stories, and I'm sure we're hearing a lot about storytelling and digital storytelling, and digital stories that travel well. So everyone in this audience might be interested in a story and not care at all where it's written. So maybe it's written by a journalist in New York, or a journalist in Karlsruhe, or a journalist in Paris. It's the content of the story that you're interested in and how that story inspires you that's interesting. And so as we saw more audiences come to us, we started to think about how do we take that into different markets. There's a huge audience here, and we, over the last 4 years, have launched now 8 editions across Europe, in language, in Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Poland, Nordics, I think I'm missing one, UK. And taking that and seeing a huge ability to grow that audience dramatically in all those markets. So where we had originally maybe in those markets a few million people coming to read our content, our global content in the US, we're now close to 30 million readers across those editions in Europe. And that model is working really, really well for us.
Sabrina, which models are you following for Germany? What is working here in our country?
Which stories?
Yeah.
I think when I think about which stories we do,
closer.
I always try to think about the reader, because usually people always say, oh, those millennials, they lack ambition and they don't want to know anything about money and they don't invest in the future. But I have a totally different impression, because I see that there are so many young people who want to achieve something, who want to make the world a better place, who have ideas for startups. I mean, what is there more ambitious to do than to found your own startup, to become an entrepreneur? And I find this so inspiring, all these young people approaching us, asking us, hey, how can I make it? If I have a business idea, how will my idea reach people? How can I tell the story of my brand? So we're trying to do a lot of stories for those people, for young people who want to start to learn about investing, because the traditional business news sites or business media are very special, and you have to have much knowledge about the finance market and stocks. And I think many people think that's too difficult to learn, and then they don't even start. But it's so important to invest in these times and to start to know about where to put your money. So I think it's about how you tell these stories to make them appealing and to show people that it's not so boring or difficult. And I think that's what we're trying to do and what BI does globally.
How is especially BI Germany set up?
We're in Karlsruhe and we launched in November 2015. And we're now one of the biggest news sites in Germany, and of course we want to grow even more. We're based in Karlsruhe because that's where our license partner is based, which is a rather unusual setting for a journalist company. But we're about 14 editors now, and we try to grow each year. And so far it's looking pretty good because I think there hasn't been a brand like BI before in Germany, because you had those traditional business sites or you had general interest sites, but you didn't have this kind of content about career and success and money, and there was a really a hunger in the audience for these kind of topics, for success stories, for inspiration. How can the readers make it? How can they achieve success? So so far it's looking good, but I hope for much more in the future.
What you said, 8 languages?
I think 7 languages across Europe, 8 editions.
And are they connected with each other, all the editions? How are you working with each other?
Yeah, so we are collaborating a huge amount with that. It's really a license model, so very important for us to have local team presence, people who understand the market, journalists in local language. So every partner is a license, but with that license, you get access to all this global content, and the challenge is, all right, deciding which of this content should I localize, what should I translate, what should I write locally on top of this, and the ability to have all those layers actually is what I think makes Business Insider successful, is that we have a huge global, we're writing 300 or 400 stories a day globally, so
that's a lot.
A huge amount of content's there, and Sabrina has the wonderful job of deciding what is going to work for the German audience, what is going to work for the French audience, and we're informed by data, and we work very closely together on collaboration of projects. So it's a very efficient model because we have this content that we're giving to the partners and licenses in each market. They are creating their own content that they give back to us on a global level. So we might take a story. We wrote a story recently, one of our Dutch writers, about this guy who'd literally sold his house using Bitcoin and gave his whole life up for a big bet on Bitcoin. And it's a great story. Yeah. And so we use that network of we have a team kind of working globally on stories. We use that network to say this story is something that we think will travel really well onto the other sites. And so then we translated that onto the other versions. Germany ran that, right? A very successful story. So we were able to use it both ways, as well as all that big global content coming through the pipe. Local stories go the other way. And we're also working on stories where we collaborate together. So we did a view of what it's like to break your arm in every country around the world, or every country that we have journalists in. So we got the view from what's the healthcare system like in Germany, what's it like in the UK, what's it like in the US. And so that was a collaborative story where, again, we're using the resource efficiently and we're not overly replicating stories. So what we were finding when we first did it was, hey, we write a story, and then the journalist in Australia writes the same story, and then the journalist in Germany writes the same story, and maybe it's slightly different for that market, but it's essentially the same story. And that's a really inefficient model to use to creating a business model that works effectively, but also takes advantage of great content that we're already creating. So that's what we're trying to do, and we're doing more and more of that right now.
So I think everybody who's here wants to know how being more successful in what they are doing. Is it try and error, or where do you know from what is working? How you decide this story, this is working here?
We do a lot of analysis to see what kind of patterns, what kind of stories are interesting for the readers, and then we know which kind of brands are always interesting for a young audience. Like, we know that they love to know anything about Tesla, for example, because it's such a cool brand, and they want to.
It's
to
a
know
big thing,
how,
yeah, right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and they want to know how Elon Musk got so successful, and if he has a tip for them that they can try for themselves. And also, of course, with Facebook's shift, it was also a time where we had to learn to tell stories differently, because the time of the huge viral hits is over, as I think most publishers have noticed by now. So I think now it's really about distribution, to have not only one huge traffic source, but to have many different channels where you can reach your readers.
To
you
spread.
have as many channels as possible, because then it sums up to a big number, but you're not as dependent as many publishers were before on Facebook. Now the first viral sites in the US are closing down because they were just dependent on Facebook. So it's very important for a publisher, and also if you have a blog or your own site and want to reach the readers, to diversify.
Success always means money, either. How you monetize? How does BI monetize?
It's a great question. We kind of were looking at it the other day, and we monetize mostly through advertising, but actually have a very diverse advertising group of areas that we monetize from. So to Sabrina's point, Facebook is a monetization engine for us, but we're not overly reliant on Facebook. With the European network that we created, one of the reasons we did that was our ability to then do global advertising for big brands and clients, and seamlessly connect that across multiple markets. So that's another revenue stream that's growing really well for us, and is an interesting one that's added to monetization on a local front, which might be through content, which might be through programmatic advertising, which might be through Facebook, which might be through Twitter, which might be through. So there's a lot of channels in here that now provide monetization. E-commerce is another one we're doing. But I think the advice that I would give, and the important thing is, experimentation is absolutely culturally key to